Yeah. It's a little warm in here, so I'm going to take off my jacket. Get it up a little bit. Okay. So good morning, everybody. Okay.
Good morning.
I am Ben Clark, retired Air Force Lieutenant Colonel, retired state senator, had the privilege of serving Cumberland and Hope counties for 10 years in the North Carolina Senate. And currently I am a 20-year information technology professional working at Fort Liberty, formerly Fort Bragg in Fayetteville, North Carolina. And I want to be your lieutenant governor because I believe that North Carolina deserves a lieutenant governor who will care for and care about everybody, without exception. That's everybody, unlike the current guy in office. And I believe that everyone deserves to live in a safe and healthy environment. I believe that everyone deserves to be able to pursue their dreams and to thrive. And I believe that absolutely our state has a responsibility and obligation to do what it can to make sure individuals have the opportunity to achieve those goals. So, that being said, I want to hit the pause button a little bit because oftentimes you only have about 2 minutes to speak and you try to rush through everything. So what I want to do is briefly talk about the role of the lieutenant governor. Okay, in the state of North Carolina, especially for the folks who may not be long-time North Carolinians, the lieutenant governor and the governor do not run on the same ticket. As many of you may know, we currently have a Democratic governor, thank God, and unfortunately a Republican lieutenant governor. Yeah, so they do not run on the same ticket. Now, so what is the job of the lieutenant governor? Well, it is prescribed by our state constitution and general statutes, and for the most part, you can speak of that role in 3 parts. 1, succession, 2, president of the Senate, and 3, service on boards and commissions. So let's take the first one, succession. With regard to succession, if the governor were to pass away, the lieutenant governor would become the governor. If the governor were to become incapacitated, temporarily or whatever, and not able to serve for whatever reason, the lieutenant governor would become the acting governor until such time as the governor could return to perform his duties. In the event that the governor is out of state for some reason, then technically you could say that the lieutenant governor would become the acting governor. And that leads to the stunt that the current lieutenant governor pulled about 2 weeks ago when Governor Cooper was out of state. You know, at the time the Constitution was written, we didn't have all the communications and tools and things like that we have today to make it easy to continue to perform the roles that you're supposed to be performing as a governor. So he decided to pull a little stunt and call a press conference and talk about much about nothing. But that is not what the provision is for. But anyway, if the governor is unable to be there for whatever reason, the lieutenant governor would be the acting governor. And then I talked about the boards and commissions. The lieutenant governor serves on a variety of boards. I'll only mention 3 or 4 of them. There are several. But the ones that get the most attention is that the lieutenant governor serves on the State Board of Education, serves on the State Board of Community Colleges, serves on the North Carolina Commission of Military Affairs, and also serves on the North Carolina Energy Policy Council. Those are like the 4 big ones, okay? And we can go over those on the sidebar if you like. So that gives you some idea of the role of the lieutenant governor. Now, when I'm invited to speak, I say, well, there are certain things I'm going to talk about, and I'm going to go boom, 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 boom. But then you have the opportunity to speak to people before you get up and say, well, I'm going to pause here and there and talk about a few things. Like somebody asked about the qualifications for someone running for the office of lieutenant governor. Well, I think I am eminently qualified and better qualified than anybody that will be running for this office. I mentioned that one of the things that the Lieutenant Governor does is serves on the North Carolina Military Affairs Commission. I'm a 20-year Air Force veteran, retired Lieutenant Colonel. I've been working the last 20 years at the Mission Training Complex at Fort Bragg, serving our soldiers by providing a variety of training on computer platforms, et cetera, et cetera. I know about the military, and I know its importance to this state. I indicated one of the boards that I would serve on would be the State Board of Education. Well, there was an interim period between leaving the military and starting to work in my current full-time day job, in which I served as a high school teacher in a science and technology program up there in Maryland. And then when I came to North Carolina, for 2 years I worked for the Cumberland County Web Academy, which was the predecessor to the North Carolina Web Academy. And I taught honors astronomy and earth science for 2 years using that methodology. So I have experience clearly as an educator. My mother was an educator for 17 years. But that's another story which would take me off the beaten path. But, and then one of the roles, which we'll talk about, of which we talked about, of the Lieutenant Governor, is to serve as the President of the Senate, okay? Now, I served in the state Senate for 10 years. I say 5 terms, but many people aren't aware how long a term is. So for 10 years, I served in the North Carolina Senate. And in that capacity, you get to observe the person performing the duties of the Lieutenant Governor as the President of the Senate every day that you're in the chambers. So I'm intimately familiar with what that person does, should do in that capacity. So my qualifications to serve are impeccable. And then also we have that issue, like when one candidate says something oftentimes, the other starts repeating it. So I put a tweet out there that I'd be ready to serve on day one. And so what gives people the good feelings that, well, if something were to happen to the governor, that I would be able to step in and serve on day one? Well, in the Air Force, I served in a lot of leadership positions over the 20-year course of my career. As a matter of fact, my first permanent duty assignment over in Fellberg Air Force Station in Germany, a site that had about 100 people, and I was a lieutenant at that time. I'd only been on site 4 months, and for unforeseen circumstances that arose, the commander was relieved of duty. There were only 2 officers on site. I had to take command of that unit for 4 months as a brand new, spanking new, almost second lieutenant. I was the top man at that site for 4 months, and with 100 people. And throughout my career, like I indicated, I served in charge of a lot of different entities in which I was running the show and had people working for me. So the aspect of leadership, the aspect of knowledge and breadth of experience, like I said, unimpeachable. Nobody will be able to touch me. So then essentially comes down to, well, what do we believe in? And I briefly told you some of the things I believed in. But, I was born and raised in North Carolina, and I love North Carolina, and I like calling North Carolina my home, and I'm sure you all do too. And under Democratic control, North Carolina had a long history of leaning forward in its approach to education, in its approach to healthcare, in its approach to environmental stewardship, and in its approach to equality for all. We did those things. And at the end of the day, that is my cause. That will be my focus, and that is why I want to serve. That is to move this state forward and not one step back. And also to extinguish the flames of hatred roaring across our state, often under the pretense of religion and faith. We've seen what the current occupant of this seat does with this platform, which is another thing that Lieutenant Governor has given that is not necessarily spoken about in the constitutional laws. You have an immense platform. And you can use that platform for the good of the people, the good of the state, or you can use it in a divisive way. And I will never do that. If I'm elected to be your Lieutenant Governor, you don't have to worry about me ever disdaining you, disparaging you, or disrespecting you. You deserve better than that. Better than that. So, but serving in that office and serving as a Democrat, it's not all just about me. We need to make sure we select Democrats up and down that ballot. But we need to come together. We need to come together if we're going to do the things that I would like to see this state doing. sustaining excellence in public education, promoting justice and equality, expanding access to healthcare, cultivating a vibrant and thriving economy for all North Carolinians. That is what we need to do. Now, I know I talked about expanding access to healthcare, and you'll say, well, we just expanded Medicaid, and yes, we did, which is a great thing, 10 years too late. You know, when I first went into the state Senate, sworn in 2013, I can remember it almost like it was yesterday on that Senate floor, with Senator Apodaca standing, waving a bill in his hand, saying, we will not expand Medicaid in the state of North Carolina. We will not establish healthcare exchanges in the state of North Carolina to make it easy for people to access insurance via the Affordable Care Act. Any money that had been received from the Affordable Care Act to the state that had not yet been spent was to be sent back unspent. Waited 10 long years, finally, to expand Medicaid. 10 years of 600,000 people in the state going uncovered that could have been covered. To me, that was the most egregious act perpetrated on the citizens of this state during my 10 years. But folks, it's up to us. Sometimes they say, sorry.
Take your time.
Yeah, that one gets me. They say elections don't matter, but they do. We went 10 years without Medicaid expansion because folks didn't show up in 2010, which allowed the Republicans to flip our General Assembly. And then in 2013, they picked up additional seats because they had gerrymandered the seats after the decennial election, and they gained the supermajorities. And that happened to be the time that I stepped into the Senate. And they acted and did everything they thought they were big and bad enough to do. And lo and behold, where are we now? Back, where they have supermajorities in the state Senate, in the state House. Now let me tell you something. You know, in our lives, we all hit a rough patch every now and then. Life throws us a curveball. And that happened to me in April. I was at work at Fort Liberty there. And I was experiencing significant pain in my lower abdomen. So I drove myself to the Army Medical Center at Fort Liberty. Turns out that I had an incarcerated hernia. 2 hours after having arrived there, the surgeon directed the staff to move me to an emergency surgery ward for emergency surgery. I had arrived at an inflection point. A mere 2-hour delay and the hernia would have become strangulated and I would have been in a life-threatening situation. I had arrived at an inflection point. So what's that got to do with the politics of North Carolina? Well, my friends, we are at an inflection point regarding our ability to influence the outcomes of policies within the higher political institutions of our state. We're at an inflection point. And the only way we're going to be able to get ourselves out of that is voting. It does matter. I know you say, they always say that this is the most important election. Well, I think it's probably clear to the folks in here that our democracy is on the ballot. That's pretty doggone important. That's pretty doggone important. So it's up to us to act. Because if we don't show up in record numbers in November 2024, I hate to think what might happen, because we cannot afford results in 2024 akin to what we experienced in 2022, when the Republicans pulled out their brooms and swept us in elections across the state. If we allow that to happen again, we could find ourselves living under the tyranny of one-party MAGA rule. Folks, we need to demagatize the state of our state politics. Let me repeat that again. We need to demagatize the state of our state politics. And the only way we're going to do that is by voting. And it's up to Democrats to do it. It's up to Democrats to get out there and make sure we get it done and move our state forward and not one step back. Not one step back to underfunded schools and where kids can't read.
That's right.
Not one step back to the rule of law for some, but not for everyone. Not one step back to women being treated as second-class citizens. Not one step back on our commitment to Social Security and Medicare for our seniors. Not one step back to governance by fear, hatred, and division. Not one step back to the receipt of justice for some, but not for everyone. Not one step back to underfunded and under-resourced environmental protections. No, not one step back. Because we, the Democrats, are going to fight for our constitutional rights. Because we are going to fight for our human rights. Because we're going to fight for the future of our state. Not one step back. Because remember, the future of our state belongs to those with the will to write it. And we shall, because we will move forward and not one step